Howdy! Today we have a little bit longer of a video, so just bear with me. I sped it up just to make it a little easier to watch, but I will give you lots of good information while we're watching. So we are making spring and bottles, and first we're taking off the plastic on the 2-liter bottles, and we washed the insides and just wiping it down, and then we're gonna cut like couple inches from the bottom so we can flip the top upside down. So yeah, you can see me cutting right there. It's kind of hard to cut the plastic, so be very careful whenever doing it. I thought I was going to cut my fingers, so maybe scissors aren't the best method. Maybe try using a sharp knife. So just to give you a little more background, a spring is formed whenever the groundwater moves down gradient, so basically downhill but underground, and then it hits an impermeable surface, so that could be like clay, like we're going to use in this model here. And whenever it hits that impermeable surface, it can't continue down anymore, but the water still has to continue. So it keeps going along the permeable layer until it hits the surface where it will come out in a spring. So that's where we get things like the Barton Springs, where it has fresh water coming out all the time. And in those, there are artesian springs, which are high-powered springs. It's basically like a fire hydrant. And so now in the video, we put the lids back on the bottles, and then I had to go get my rocks from outside, and I put them in a little container just to make it easy, and then we were trying to figure out how to put them into the bottles, so I ended up trying to use my hand to do it, but scooping the pebbles up with the bottle turned out to be easier. Maybe if you had like a little cup to scoop them, that would have been the best option. But we filled it up to about a couple inches past the slope you see there. And then after we got the pebbles in there, we made little holes that would be our springs. And personally, using a knife would have been easier for this, so I didn't make such a big hole that I later had to cover up a little bit so the water didn't flow out of it so fast. And also the sand was falling out. But whenever I made the hole smaller, the sand did not fall out, and so it made it better. In the ground between your aquifer and the surface, there's lots of different layers of rocks in between. This can be sand, like big gravel, kind of like the stuff that we have there. It can be even bigger. There can be sheets of rock, kind of like limestone, where it has tiny holes where it passes through. You can have clay, which makes it harder for the water to pass through whenever it is flowing down. So typically in sandy areas, they will have recharge zones where it only takes like a day or so for the water to go down into the aquifer, and this makes it really beneficial. And they try to protect areas like that. And then so here in the video, we are putting our clay together and making it about the shape of the bottle so we can stick it in there. It's just regular molding clay that I got from Walmart. And I tried to stick mine in there, but mine was way too big. So whenever you're sticking it into the bottle, you want to make sure that it makes a little slant so where the water can flow out of the spring that we made. It is very important that you make sure that the clay is molded up onto the sides as well so that there's no leaks whenever you pour the water in later. And it took us a while to get the clay exactly how we wanted it, so I did cut some of that out. And here we put the sand in. It's very sandy, and so the water will flow through it very well. And so that's kind of what I was talking about whenever I was talking about the recharge zones are typically made of sandy grounds. And so also what encases your aquifer does a lot to how the water is. So the aquifer where I live, the Middle Trinity, it is encased in a limestone, and so therefore our water is very hard, and whenever it comes out of the faucets, you can tell that it's hard because it leaves that white residue. Not all aquifers are created equally, so some are really big and some are really small. Here we are cutting up the felt that will act as our grass. So we're trying to make it kind of circular. I didn't want to waste time to make mine super circular, but my mom did, and she made hers very circular. So whenever I first put it in there, I forgot that I was supposed to put more gravel in, so I'm grabbing that right now, and I put a little bit of gravel in there. And then so that acts as more of the rocky surface, and so whenever you pour the water in, it'll show how the water travels through the ground and gets to a spring, for example. And then after the gravel was placed in there, we put our grass in. And then once we had the grass in there, I got a cup of water and we poured some water in as well. So now that I've gotten my water that's in my fancy Middle Trinity groundwater conservation cup, I poured some in just to see what would happen, and I clearly did not pour enough in, so I poured some more in, and then you can see that the water flowed through the grass pretty fast and then straight out, and it just squirted out like kind of like a fire hydrant would. And then hers, it took a little more time, and the water just kind of seeped through, and you could see that the ground was very saturated because the water table is above the ground. So this is kind of what happens whenever you get big rains all week, and then the water just kind of sits on the surface. And then that comes to the end of our little experiment that you can do. It is very hands-on if you want it to be, and I think it would be very fun for probably about 4th graders to learn about, and they could also learn about different layers in the earth and rocks. Thank you.